All right, guys. In our last video, we talked about introduction to the Photoshop interface and the basic arrangement of our panels and understanding how layers actually work, right? So today we're going to kickstart this with learning some of the tools, basic and important tools inside of Photoshop. So I'm just going to click on File and click on New like this, and I'm just going to use inches. I'm just going to set this to a 5x5. And everything else stays the same like we've done in the previous videos, and click on create like this. Okay, so now we have all of this arranged. If you didn't get this, you can go back to the last video which I showed you how to comprehensively arrange all of these panels. These are called panels inside of Photoshop. Now today we're concerned about the left side of life, which is where we have the tools, right? So basically, let me just come back here and fill this with I'm not going to use gradients. I'm going to use solid colors. So I'm just going to use this. I'm just going to use blue because I like the color blue. Sometimes it can spark up your creative juice, right? So interestingly, let's talk about this tool, which is the move tool right now. So the move tool, the shortcut for the move tool is, you can see that the tools in Photoshop are quite arranged well in a systematic order, right? So you can see that the shortcut for this is V. So basically the move tool is like the primary or the basic tool inside of Photoshop. Now, why did I say that? The move tool is used to select your panels. It's used to toggle between the menus and even the standard bar, and even to select every other tool, right? Take for instance, you have a rectangle here basically. And my rectangle is going to be white. Your move tool can be used to move, just like the name implies, to move tools all around, right? And of course, like I said, it is the basic tool inside of Photoshop. Now, the next thing we need to note here is under the move tool, you have the artboard tool. Now, the artboard tool is quite comprehensive. What I mean is quite comprehensive. It can be used for various things, including creating Instagram carousels and Instagram posts that you just need to see your posts at once at a glance. Now, before you click on the artboard, it is very important that you understand designing with layers and using these layers first before you toggle between artboard, because artboard can be a little bit confusing if you've not understood the whole concept of creating a new document. Like this is your document tab. This is a document inside of Photoshop, this one we just created. So if you've not understood the concept of creating, using your layers and working with your extension like this, using the artboard might be somewhat difficult for you. Now, let's work with creating artboard. Now, let me just delete this. It doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to go on and click on artboard 2. Right now, when you select the artboard 2, you can see that here on the property bar or on the standard bar, you can see that it is now activated. You're right. This is your artboard. So the size by default you are seeing here, this is the size you're going to have. So now I'm going to show you how this works. So when you can manually draw this like this, and you can see that you now have an artboard. So what creating the artboard does is, like, it has removed that first one we created. That's the first design we had and all of that. So you now have artboard. You understand? So basically, your design is now going to be artboards. Now, on the right side here, under properties, you have the size. So this is where you can change the size. So if you want to make it a uniform size, you can change it to 1500 by 1500, right? So immediately you click that, you can see that you now have a square shaped. But what if you want to create, you can make it a 1200. You can see that immediately your artboard actually fits into size. Now, this is the custom size for, if you're designing for Instagram, this is the custom size that you should be using now, because they change their post size and how the algorithm actually works, right? So it's not the usual standard 5x5 again. I'm not saying that doesn't work, but it works too. But you can use this for yourself too, to make things work for you. I hope you understand. Good. So basically, let's move on from here. So you have this, and you can create more by clicking this plus sign. So what this does is it creates, because Photoshop understands that you have defined your size here, so it's going to create another artboard here for you with the same size. But if you don't want this size, you can go on. But this is very, very good when you are creating a carousels. You can see your carousels can be the same sizes, and when you click in your plus, you can see that it changes. But if you don't want this size, you can easily click on the artboard you want to change, and you can go over here and select a 1500, and of course you can move this about yourself. You can see that you can easily move that if you want it to be very, very close, if you want to be distant. And if you want to toggle between the artboard, maybe you want to see which one, because it's going to click creating like this, you can create on top. But if you want to navigate between all your artboard, you can hold down your space bar and move like this just to see your artboards and all of that, right? Like I said, you can click on the artboard and move it around. You can move it up, you can move it down, and like this, you can change the size over here just the way you want it. When you want to create an artboard, take for instance, we have artboard 1, right? So you can name this also design 1. You understand? So when you name it design 1, if you make sure you open this up to see every of the layers inside the artboard. For instance, now in design 1, I can have Photoshop. Yes. So Photoshop. Right, I can use my scroll wheel to zoom close to Photoshop like this. I'm seeing it. So I can have my artboard too. Maybe I want something different. Open this up and create a new layer, select solid color, and maybe use a red color here instead of this, right? And let's see, for this artboard, I want something green. So I can open this up and create solid color like this. And I have something green like this going on here, right? So I can have the same Photoshop. What I'm just going to do is copy the layer, come here, paste it. You can see I have my Photoshop here, right? I can come here too and paste the same thing here. So just imagine that you have your, let me change the color of this so you make it rhyme, have contrast. So you can see that I have 3 artboards of different sizes. Let me make this one size quite different. Right, for the artboard, I'm just going to make this, for the width, I'm going to make it 2000. Let's see what that gives us. So 2000, this is what we have. So you can see that I have 3 artboards and all of that. So you can have in a design close to like 20 artboards, right? So if you are doing a brand guide for the company and all of that, this can come in very, very handy for you. So you don't need to create documents and open like 15 documents here. You can just work on your artboard. But the advantage to this is if you have a wide screen. If you are working on the screen, maybe you are working on your laptop and you're projecting on a bigger screen, it actually makes more sense than creating 15 artboards and you have to squint and you have to rotate. It's quite stressful, right? All right, I'm just going to move away from this, create a new document. I might come back to this artboard and inches, and I'm going to set it to a 5x5 and click on create like this. All right, so basically we've talked about the move to, and we've talked about the artboard too. So now let's talk about our selection tool. To work on the selection tools, I'm just going to bring in an image that we can actually work with. I'm just going to drag and drop this here like this, and click on this. So let's talk about the selection tool. Now I'm going to talk about one selection tool, and trust me, every other selection tool works the same way. Now basically it's just to make selection. Probably you want to make selection and also like maybe you need to make adjustment to only this part of the face. Now you've made your selection like this. You can go on and bring this, let's use our curves, and you can see that selecting the curve, it has created a mask around that area. So you can just use, you can see that the adjustment I am making is for only that place that I selected. Do you understand? So basically selection tool is to make selection. Now I can make selection of the head for if you want to create a passport and you don't want to stress yourself, you can just make selection on the head like this, and Ctrl J on your keyboard. Now, when I hide this, you're just going to be seeing this part here. So basically, all of these guys here is just used to make selection, right? Ctrl Z, and let's move on to the next thing. Right. So another tool I would like to make mention of that I used to like using before Photoshop introduced the remove background by themselves and all of that used to be the lasso tool. So the lasso tool is also used to make selection. This is manual. You can use to make a manual selection around the image like this, and make the selection and make the selection like this, right? So you can actually refine this, or you can use to just probably just press your Ctrl J and you can keep it selected on a new layer. I just made my selection like this. Well, you can be more precise when you're making your selection to use your selection the way you want it to be, right? Great. So basically, this one also works the same way. Now, for the object selection tool, you can, mind you, every other selection tool works similarly to what this also does for you. So now in this part here, you have your object selection tool. Your object selection tool, when you want to select, for example, you want to select this model here, or this man here, or this doctor, you can draw a marquee around it like this, and automatically Photoshop is going to make some calculations and is going to make a selection. And the disclaimer here is most times your selection might not be perfect. When I mean might not be perfect, there's some areas that might not be selected. You can see it's still calculating. When it's running like this, don't worry, it's not that your PC has a problem. It's just trying to calculate and get the selection right. You can see now that if you zoom close to these areas, now you can see that the selection is not working here. So it's not left for you to now refine it yourself. But then if you drag this over 10, it has done a 7/10 for you in terms of selection. It's quite better than now. If you want to deselect, what you want to deselect is you do Ctrl D to deselect, right? Whenever you're using all of these tools, if you make a selection, if you want to deselect, you press Ctrl D or Command D on your keyboard, right? So back to what I was saying about this, it still does a great job than you using this to select. This is energy sapping. Most times you just want to get into Photoshop and do something straight out of the box and just close your PC and get some rest. This doesn't come in handy. But this, on the other hand, object selection, is quite better than most of the things that you have here. Now, the quick selection tool works in a funny manner. Thank God for the introduction of AI for us to use. It makes your selection like this, and it's quite it's not satisfying based on my experience over the years, right? But thanks to the introduction of AI, I can use AI to just remove the background of my picture. This, and also the crop works in a different way. Maybe you don't want all of this. Now you can, if you check up here in the standard or property bar, you can see that it is set to 1:1. So when you reduce this like this, it's not going to change anything, right? It's not going to change anything. Instead, it's just going to shrink this up like this in a 1:1 position. But when you change this to a width and height and ratio, now this gives you the freedom to crop however you want to crop. Now this is the best form that I like to use, right? So I can crop whatever I want to crop, and when I am done, or when I get the perfect position that I need to crop, I'm just going to click enter like this, and when I click enter, I'm just going to have my crop picture the way I want it, right? So you can experiment with all of this, the square size and all of this. This comes in handy when you have a picture. For example, I'm going to go into my graphic design assets and I'm going to go into my images, right? If you've not gotten this, the link is in the description of this video to get all of these images. You can see that this bundle is actually packed with images. Now, for instance, I have this image inside of Photoshop, right? And basically what I want to do, I want to crop only this part of where I have the image. So I can use any of this size, like a 4:5. You can see what a 4:5 brings. And I can just have this, position this well. You can use your arrow key on your keyboard to actually define this. Hold down shift if you want to move fast, right? So I can say I want only this part cropped. So I can just click on enter like this, and boom, it does the cropping for me, just the way I want it cropped out, right? Great. Okay, so now that we understand the concept of the crop tool, let's move over to the brush tool. So I'm going to select hold and select the brush, B for brush tool, and I'm going to go to another document tab. Most times when you're not seeing what you are opening, click on this arrow, and you can click on what's next here. So to use the brush, I'm going to create a new layer. You cannot use it directly on top of this, right? Because you can see it's showing this sign. So I'm just going to use this. Now, the brush is the product of your foreground and your background color. Now, to use brush, there are different kinds of brush inside of Photoshop. Now, the first one you're seeing here, this is the default general brush, right? So you can go online and get different kinds of brush. You have website that gives you website like Vectizi and DeviantArt. You can get so many kinds of brush on these platforms I can use. You can see that mine, I have different kinds of brush. These are not the brushes that came with Photoshop, right? So this one here is the one, the general brushes is the one you see most times inside your Photoshop by default. So I'm just going to select this and select the soft round brush like this on a new layer. I'm just going to, you can reduce the size of the brush here. But most times I like doing this manually by using my bracket key after the letter P on your keyboard. So the one by your right is to increase, the one on your left is to decrease. So with your brush selected, you can just paint in some things like this. And one thing you need to keep in mind while using the brush tool is to consider your flow or opacity, right? So like I said, the brush is the product of your foreground and your background color. Now, it's only painting in this color because my foreground color is set to this. If I want to paint with a different color, I'm going to change the color here, and I'm just going to paint on this like this, paint on this like this. You understand? I'm going to also paint on this like this. So this is me painting with the brush, and I can also click on this arrow to revert the foreground color and background color and paint with this color as the case may be, right? So I'm just going to delete this. And one thing I want to quickly say, let me revert this, is also the flow of the brush. For instance, now let me create a new layer for this. If I paint with this way, right, it's quite different when I reduce the flow. Let me select 36 and I paint. You can see that this is much more brighter than what you have here. Now, if I continuously paint on this, I'm going to get the same effect that I have here, right? So flow actually matters a lot. Now, let me talk about increase the flow and talk about opacity. If I reduce the opacity like this and I paint, I'm not going to get the same thing that I used here. So flow is quite different from opacity. Opacity is the lightness, or it goes from the lights and the darker region. If I reduce this brush to a, like, let me say like 9, and I paint like this, you can see it's not as when it's full as you have 100%, right? But I can have my flow at 28 and somewhat close to what I have here, right? So just look at the brush as like an artist trying to paint on a canvas, and it has to be pressure sensitive. When it pressures on the canvas, it tends to give you 100%, but when it doesn't apply pressure, it tends to be around the 24 and stuff like that, right? So to get a perfect flow and everything looking the same, make sure your flow is set to 100. But there are instances in my composition videos, which you can find up here, which I used the brush to make flows and to also make the light effects. You can watch that to actually get acquainted to this brush process, right? So that's for the brush. Let's talk about gradients. Now, before we talk about gradient, let's talk about the eraser tool, right? So the eraser tool can actually come in handy, right? When I mean come in handy, you can, I have this image open here. You can see that this image, I just brought it in, and your eraser tool can be used to erase just like parts of the image. But the downside to this eraser tool is that you can not get any parts. Maybe you did a mistake. You're not supposed to erase this. You're supposed to erase these parts. You cannot get it back except you use a Ctrl Z. So that's why I would advise that instead of using the eraser tool, you create a mask around your image like this and go over to your brush, select your brush. Make sure your foreground color is set to black because you're working in a white mask, then you can conveniently remove what you want to remove. If at all you make any mistake, you can always revert this to white and paint it back. Isn't that nice? Right? So this is a non-destructive way to actually use the eraser tool. Now that's not to say that the eraser tool is completely useless. So let me disable the mask and also delete it. So that's not to say that the eraser tool is completely useless, right? Now when you're using eraser for shape, make sure the shape you want to use it for, you've rasterized it already. At this shape, you can use your eraser tool on it, and you can create effects like this using the shape. But the downside to this is you cannot make adjustments to this shape again, right? It's going to remain like this, except you go over to your blending option, and of course you use your color overlay or something like this, or your gradient overlay. In fact, that is why you have all of these guys here. In case you are somebody that likes to use stuff like this and you just want to a quick fix, so this is how you get it done, right? So away from that, let's talk about gradients, right? So to use the gradient tool, you can find the gradient here, G for gradient. So selecting the gradient, one thing you will observe up here on the standard or property bar is you have different kinds of gradients. You have your linear, you have your radial, you have your angle, and you have reflected gradients and diamond gradients. Most of the times what I use is the linear, and I also make use of the radial gradients. Now, to apply gradients, you can do that in two ways. The first way you can actually do that is by going to make sure you're selecting your rectangle first, right click and select blending option. Inside of blending option, you can select gradient overlay. So this is the first way. You can see that it has applied gradient. Now, the good news is if you're using from Photoshop 2022 or from 20 to I think it's 2020, I might be right or wrong in this video, so it's good to find out. But I'm pretty sure from the inception of Photoshop, let's say you're using your 2018, 19, 20, you have your default gradients, but over the years they have improved on this section. So you have your basic, which is the basic. Now the basic is the first one here is a combination of the color you have on your for your foreground and your background color. So if you click on this, you can see that it has changed to the combination of your foreground and background color. Basically, that's the definition of gradient. Gradient is a combination of two or more colors on an image or a vector or a shape, right? Good. So this one is just your foreground color mixed with whites, right? Or just mixed with the original color of your design. So you can move it around, you can position this well. Photoshop gradient is far more the best I have seen using. I've used so many softwares over the years, and Photoshop software gradient is the best I have seen so far, right? So basically you can toggle between, but the interesting part is that away from basic, you have other colors. Like for instance, you have the blues. You can use all of this. You can select any one of your choice and make use of it. These are default gradients. These are template gradients that you have inside of Photoshop already, that Photoshop has created for you to make your life easy and to make you work smarter instead of working harder, right? So as you know the drill, smart work wins over hard work. So if you go to purples, the same thing you have different forms of gradients. Now that's not to say you cannot create yours. So you can use your basic under gradients to create yours. And if this is not pleasing to you, you can come here and click on this. Now you have foreground to background. So you can click on the color, click here and probably change the color, maybe use red, click OK. To change the one on this side, which is this guy here, you can click on this color and maybe use a yellow color, and you have this set to yourself, right? And of course you can actually control the position here also, right? That is not to say you cannot do this here by yourself. And you can move this around. You can control the opacity of each color, like select this and you can move the opacity around. Maybe you want this and all of that. So it's flexible. You can experiment with all of this and get it done yourself. When you're done, you click OK. Now, before you click OK, let's understand this part. Probably you want the red to be on this side and the yellow to be this side. You have a button for that, which is the reverse button. So click on reverse like this. You can see that it has moved. It's by default, you will see how it actually turns up here. But it's very, very important that you move it out of the way so that you can actually still see what you're doing here. Now, for the angle, you can rotate this to get different angles, and you can do this manually also to change. You can see I've changed the angle, and scale. Most times I love using 100, right, for scale. Right, so if you turn this around, you can see I'm changing the angles and everything is still intact, just the way I like it. Right, so you can choose from under here. You can select radial. Now this is what the radial does. So you can increase the scale for this, and of course changing position actually works magic while you're using this, right? So you can use this and change this the way you want it to be, right? So this is me just changing angles and all of that, so you can see the results each angles is giving me. You understand? And of course, you can, if you choose that you want to work with this kind of gradient in the entire projects that you are working on, you can make defaults, right? So you can make this gradient your default by clicking on make defaults. And of course, each time you come here, you're going to see this as your default color, right? So that's the first way to actually do this. Now, the second way is actually quite tricky. So when you go to the adjustment layer, you're going to select gradients, right? So selecting gradients, it's going to apply the gradients to the entire composition that you have here. So let's click OK. While now the trick to this is, if you want to make this perfect, you can right click on it and click on what? Create clipping mask. Make sure the object you're clipping it to is directly underneath. So you can see that this is the gradient and this is the shape. So you can now refine this by selecting any of these guys that you have here and making do with what you have. So you can have all of this. You can change the scale. You can change the angle just the way you want it and all of that, right? This actually works too, but most times I tend to find this very, very useful when I'm working on a bigger scale, not this kind of small objects, like a bigger one. Then for this small objects, I prefer using the blending option. I hope that kicks in. Right, good. So let's talk about some of the tools that we have here: the blur, the sharpen, and the smudge. Right, so I'm just going to talk about only the blur tool, because most times I use it in my compositions. So for the blur tool, you can use to blur specific areas of the design. For instance, let me Ctrl Z this. If I want to blur, I don't want the attention to be on the hair region here, I can just simply blur this out like this. And of course, you can turn the strength. The strength is set to 100 by default for me. And of course, I can blur out, make the brush bigger by using the bracket key after the P, like this. And I can blur some regions here like this to just make it look as if the focus is on her alone and not this person here, right? So I can go on and on and on and on and on trying to blur this. The more you press harder on this thing, the more blur you achieve, right? So this is a systematic way to actually give you a blur effects without destroying the composition of your image, just the way it is. So it is very, very important that you use the blur effectively and you don't make a mess out of it, right? Great. Okay, so let's move on from the blur tool and all of those things, and let's talk about the pen tool. Now, when you click on the pen tool, click and hold, you can see the different kinds of pen tool. So I'll do a quick rundown of how all of this works. Now, before you start using, the first one you start using is the basic one, the one you have inside of Adobe Illustrator, CorelDRAW, and some of all this vector-based application, right? So let's not forget the same pen tool. So clicking on the pen tool, the first thing you need to understand is you have the fill and you have the stroke. By default, my stroke is always set to 0 because I don't like using stroke, right? Except for instances where I have to use them. So you can see now the fill is set to white. So when I start drawing, For example, I could have a triangle like this. You can see, very easy. I can draw shapes like this, right? And I could also have things like this too. So these are basic shapes, right? Now it is very, very important that as you are a graphic designer, that you should know how to use your pen tool. It's not negotiable at all. So you should know how to actually use a pen tool. I'm going to be doing a separate video of how to use the pen tool and how to get better using the pen tool. So for this, I'm just going to go on this way. So like basically you can use to draw straight lines, right? So all of these things I have drawn now are just basic shapes you can use to draw your basic rectangle. If you hold down your shift and you maintain a straight line, right? So now we have just been drawing straight line. You can also use it to draw curved line. So clicking on a point like this, I can draw something like this, draw here, and click and drag to draw a curve. Now, to continue with a straight line, hold down your Alt key, break this, and click here to draw what looks like a cone, right? And you can come over here where you have your direct selection to click on direct selection to click on the node to adjust each of this node. So these two here and these two here, most times they work hand in hand. So you can use this to adjust, click on this, you can adjust the node here and bring this down like this. So as easy like that, you can have simple and complex shapes done by using the pen tool, right? So let's talk about the second one here, which is the family of the pen tool, which is the freeform tool. Now the freeform tool is just like the pen tool, but it works differently. So the freeform tool, think of the freeform tool like a pen or like a pencil. So you can use to draw, and at the end of the day, you can see it's filled. So if you don't want your field to be white, you can change the color here. For instance, you want your field to be green, you can start drawing, and of course, you can see that it has turned to green, but I'll just leave it at white. So I'm going to delete these two layers. So like I said, the freeform tool is just to draw lines shape in its freeform mode, just like this, right? So you don't need to have a sketchbook or anything. You can just come up here and draw stuff like this. For example, you can use this to draw cloud. I'm not trying to be perfect here. So probably you have a comic book they are trying to get together. Can use this. Oh, this is not perfect. Please don't try this at home. So I'm just going to delete this like this, and I'm just going to move on from this. So the next one I'm going to touch in is the curvature tool, just like the word implies. So when you click like this, you can draw curves like this. And yeah, so let me put this into better use. For example, if I want to draw, selecting my curvature tool, I want to draw waves. So I can use this to draw waves like sea waves. And finish this up like this and put this here. And I can also move on to draw some other ones like this. Move up here, move up here, move up here, and move up here. I'm going to end it here. So I can change the color and I can use this and I can put this down. You can see how it is easy for me to draw all of this just by using the curvature tool. Of course, you can always go back to your direct selection tool to adjust each of this node and create something different out of what you have existing already, right? Like stuff like this. You can also create this, maybe bring this down, and you can do what works best for you, right? So the next one I would like to talk about is the add anchor points. Now this is how this works. So for instance, I have my rectangle drawn like this, right? I can actually use this to actually add anchor points. By clicking on this, I can click add anchor points and add an anchor point here. So with this, I can use my direct selection to move this around and give this the curve that I want to achieve, right? So I can decide to also use the delete to also delete the anchor points like that. So you can see that all of the pen tools that are here actually work hand in hand, right? Good. So you can use this alongside and also use the direct selection tool and path selection tool. For example, if you want to select all paths, you can use this to select all paths, and you can work out all of this by yourself. If you want to select only one node, you can use the direct selection to click on the node, and this is the only part you're selecting. Click on this. This is the only part you're selecting. So you can also use this to modify objects too. So you can click on the node here, and if you have a node here also, you can also click on it and then move it around, right? So if you're familiar with the shape tool inside of CorelDRAW, or you're familiar with this same tool inside of Illustrator, it shouldn't be a problem for you here. So I'm just going to go on and delete this and delete all of this also, right? So that's that for the pen tool and the direct selection tool. Now let's talk about the text tool. So the first and the basic text tool you have here is the horizontal text tool, right? So like the word implies, horizontal. So everything you're going to be doing is going to be typing just the default way, typing way. So you can press Ctrl T on your keyboard to increase the size of this way. And then of course, this is the horizontal. So the vertical, if you click on the vertical, you're going to be typing this way. So, and I believe this is self-explanatory. Then also the vertical with a mask, and also horizontal type mask too. So if you click on this, you'll be typing, but it's going to be in mask. So Photoshop, and when you click enter and you click back, this is what you have. So everything you've typed basically is going to be masked out. Most times you don't get to see people use this. You can either fill this mask by pressing Ctrl Delete, or by clicking Alt Delete, as the case may be. But then you don't see this too often. So Ctrl Delete, Ctrl D to deselect all of this. What you would see most times and what you would definitely work most with is the horizontal type and the vertical type, right? So I'm going to delete two of this, and the next one I'm going to talk about is the rectangle tool. So for the different shapes we have, the first one you have here, this is where you can find them. The first one you have here is your rectangle tool. You can see the shortcut. All of these tools have their primary shortcut. For the P, of course, is pen tool P. Then the selection tool, the direct and the paths A. Then also the rectangle tools, the shortcut is U. Now it's good to have all of these at the back of your mind so that you can easily brisk through all of this tools without wasting time trying to click and select. You know how hard that is. So I'm just going to click on this, which is the rectangle, and select a rectangle. Basically, you can have a rectangle like this. And of course, if you want to have rounded corners, you can click any of this corner here and create corners like this. Now, if for instance, you want only one part to be, to have the rounded corner, like only this region, double click here. When this turns blue, you can see that it's quite different from what this is right now. You can move in like this. If you want to make this part also into a curved area, double click, 1, 2, and move this inside like this to create a shape like this, right? So this is how you can manipulate your rectangle like this, right? So the next one here is your ellipse. Now to draw a perfect circle, make sure you always hold down Shift when you're drawing a perfect circle, right? Shift like this, and you have a perfect circle. Now to draw a oval circle, just drag and drop like this. This is like a shape of an egg or a spaceship. This is how you achieve this. But to draw a perfect circle, make sure you're holding down the Shift key like this, and there you go. So the triangle, you have a triangle. Of course, to get a perfect triangle, hold down your Shift. And then also what you have there again, you have your polygon. So you draw your polygon, and also up here you have, like for instance, now you have 5 here. You can make this 12, and 5 here. Okay, let's control this here. You can make this 12 here, and you can see that I've increased my polygon from 5 to 12. So I can increase it like this again, and of course I can use my direct selection to click on a part here and create something like this inside of Photoshop using my notes and all of that, right? So this is something to also put into consideration when you're working with these shapes like this. So I'm just going to revert this to 5 and everybody goes home happy. So the last one here is your line 2. So your line 2, of course, to use the line 2, hold down shift to maintain a straight line, right? To draw a line, hold down shift to maintain a straight line. And if you want to increase the stroke of the line, you can come here or do this here and increase. Make sure you are selecting the line itself. You can see I'm selecting all of that, right? So to increase the stroke, you can do this here. You can see that the same stroke I have that is for here. That's because they are all basically on the same layer, right? So if I create this separately and I drag this like this, I'm going to have this separate and I'm going to increase the stroke. Of course, to change the stroke color, I can come here and pick any color of my choice and easy peasy, you have this out of the way. So that is it for the last one here is the custom shape tool, right? The custom shape tool by default, I'm just going to remove the stroke from this, click on none. Of course, you can add gradients to this by clicking this. Of course, this is what you get. But I'm going to set this to none. And for the fill, I can decide to change the color to any one of my choice, right? Now, if you go up here under shape, you're going to see different kinds of shape by default, which Photoshop has for you. So if you click on this and you drag and drop this, this is what you're going to get. If you know the name of this animal, you can drop in the comment section so that we can all learn together, right? So back to the custom shape, you can see that you have so many other shapes. You have boats, you have flowers, you have stars. And when you are creating a new shape, make sure you create a new layer so that you don't get confused with everything you have. So basically, this is all for the shape and using them inside of Photoshop, right? So back to this is the hand tool. Now the hand tool is used to pan around your interface. You can use it to move around, especially when you are working with artboards. You have so many artboards, you can use this to actually move around. But when you are on your move tool, you can hold down your space key and just pan around too, so it works the same way, right? So you have your rotate view, so you can use to rotate your view. You can set your view to 360 and all of that. And most times you don't get to use this except you're using a Wacom tablet, right? And last but not the least, this is the zoom tool. So you can use this to zoom closer to your document, zoom in and out. But then you can use your scroll wheel to zoom in and out. If you don't have that activated, you can go over to your file. No, that's edit, and you can go over to preferences, general. Under general, you should find it under tools. So under tools, make sure this is checkmarked. Zoom with scroll wheel. It's only by selecting this that you can zoom in and out just the way I'm zooming in and out, right? So this is the foreground and this is the background color. To set it to the default, you can click here or click D on your keyboard to set it to a black and white. That's the default color, right? All right, guys, I'll see you in the next video just up above.